Now, I can tell you a little bit about what's on my little mind this Shabbos. And I'm going to start by telling you a very old joke. You probably all heard it. Doesn't mean it isn't funny. But you probably haven't heard it in a while. But many, many years ago, there was a joke that was told about the Jews who were arriving in Israel from the former Soviet Union when they started to be able to come up, when the refuseniks could leave. So a Sabra asked, a Sabra, of course, is somebody born in Israel, asked a new immigrant from Russia, "So, Ivan, how was life back in Russia?" And he says, "I couldn't complain." "And how were your living quarters there?" "I couldn't complain." "And your standard of living?" "Again, I couldn't complain." "Well," said the Sabra, "if everything was so good back in Russia, why did you bother coming here?" "Oh," replied the Russian immigrant, "here I can complain." That's it. That's from the Torah reading today. Anyway, in that spirit, I think today's Torah reading was given the wrong name. It is Bahalotecha, and it means, and you shall light. Bahalotecha, and you shall light. But I told you this before, but I'm going to tell you again. This book is named wrong. It should have been named Sefer Kvetch, the Book of Complaining. Sefer Kvetch. That's what this parsha should have been called. And I say this because Bnei Israel had reached a point in their journey when they should be so happy. They're out of Egypt, out of slavery. They have anything they want. Everything is good. And any reasonable person would have thought that they would have been jumping for joy for the chance to go to the land flowing with milk and honey. But were they? Forget about it, as they say in Brooklyn. Forget about it. No, they were not. Instead, almost as soon as they took their very first step into what should be the beginning of their most exciting future, we read in chapter 11, verse 1, that, in quotes, the people took to complaining bitterly. You see that, you got to say, what a shanda. It's a disgrace. How could anybody complain like that? I don't like this. I don't like that. The water is not nice. It doesn't taste so good. The fact they have water in the desert is nothing. It didn't taste the way they wanted to, and they were bored and everything. So think about it. They had everything they needed to be happy. They had free shelter, all the food they could eat, all the water they could drink, and most importantly, they had a promise from God that their future would be much better than their past. Yeah, that's what more do you want? I know they didn't have air conditioning. They didn't have microwave ovens. They didn't have computer games. They didn't have social media. Maybe they were much better off than we are. But how could they have any doubt that this divine promise would be fulfilled? How could they doubt such a thing after what God had done for them already? And even though they had God's promise, Bnei Yisrael immediately murmured. They immediately complained. They criticized. They grumbled. They whined. They murmured. They found fault. They nitpicked. They nagged. In other words, they kvetched. They kvetched. They kvetched. And they kvetched. And did I mention they kvetched? Their kvetching went on and on and on and on. From what I hear during our conversations sometimes, in any synagogue in which I have ever found myself, there's kvetching there. It's just how it is. There's always kvetching. And when it is cloudy, we want the sun. When it is sunny, we want clouds. When it is warm, we want it cooler. When it is cool, we want it warmer. If we get this, we want that. Fetch, fetch, fetch. One thing is for sure. What we fetch about today is a lot different than the fetching of Bnei Yisrael in the wilderness. You see, they had a one-to-one relationship with Adonai. And all they did was fetch to God. That's it. They could, and they did. We can only imagine how much this had to frustrate Moshe. And it did. I know most of us here have raised children, a child or more. So we can empathize with what had to be a huge frustration for Moshe. He was like the father of everybody there. Not the way God is, but everybody came to him all the time and fetched. We get a hint of this when we read chapter 11. You got to hear this. Chapter 11, verses 14 and 15. I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. I feel bad for him, but it just sounds funny. So what do we hear? We hear Moshe bitching or complaining or whatever it is, fetching to God. And he said, you know, I alone cannot carry this entire nation. If this is how you deal with me, then kill me now. That's what Moshe said. Can you imagine? Kill me now? If that is not frustration, nothing is. Kill me now. Oh my God. Like I said, it's not funny, but you can appreciate it. We've all thought that. You look up to the heavens, you go, kill me now. You can't take it anymore. So with this kind of thing coming from Moshe's mouth, we can imagine how God must have felt. This special man who God loves so much was driven to such frustration that he had to beg God to kill me now. The thing is, it was not just coming from Moshe. It was coming from each and every one of the members of Bnei Israel every single minute of every single day. Who could stand it? Who could stand listening to this? Could you? I don't think so. I don't think anybody could. So interestingly, the commentators point out a very thought-provoking nuance. Leave it to the rabbis. Leave it to the sages. They let us know in no uncertain terms that the Hebrew text does not mean that the people complained. It means that the people were like complainers. What's the difference? I told you it was thought-provoking, and it is a nuance. What it means is that the people were not actually complaining out loud. It was worse than that. There was this horribly annoying din of murmuring that continued to come from them from under their breath. Oh, can you imagine? Did you ever have kids in the backseat of your car with their sibling? Oh, you want to die. All you do is hear the noise, and it's not nice, and you know it's not nice. But this continued to come from them until from under their breath. It just kept coming. Can you imagine having to listen to that 24/7? He's a bum. There's a bum. He's looking out my window. This is my window. You look out your window. That's my moon. Don't you look at my moon. You know what I'm talking about. It was this constant level of noise that had to be driving Moshe crazy. Had to. Furthermore, it drove God to anger. All the people were grumbling, mumbling, and murmuring. But unlike us, unlike you and I, they never bothered to tell anyone why they complained. They just did. They didn't have a reason. They just complained. We know they had everything they needed and wanted. The Torah teaches us over and over again that God does not get angry at people who complain for a good reason. You have a good reason to complain? You want to complain about the Middle East? You want to complain about somebody who's sick that you love and you want them to get better? God doesn't complain that. God doesn't get angry at that. We're taught that if the complaints are valid, then we should speak up and make our concerns heard. An example of this is how we complain during our prayer services, along with thanking God for the good things we have. We look through the Siddur, it's all praising God. It's one psalm after another, it's another thing, and we praise God. But during the Amidah, when I say the Kedusha, what do we complain about? We complain about God. We complain to God about Zion not being protected and not at peace. We do this all the time. When? Every single day, every single Shabbat, every single Yom Tov. It is then when I beg God, Matai. It says in the Siddur, Matai Timloch B'Tzion. Most cantors don't say that. They go, Matai, 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 when. More sometimes than that. They repeat it. When will you rule? When will you rule over Zion? We're frustrated. We're complaining. And it's good. Just as we read back in Shemot, in Exodus chapter 15, verse 4, when Bnei Israel got hungry, they murmured, and God provided them with manna. They were hungry, so they complained. And when Bnei Israel was without tasty water, they murmured again, and God made the water sweet with the help of Miriam. And this time it's different. This time Bnei Israel was moving into the wilderness and was much better organized. They knew where they should be, with whom they should be, by the tribes and so on. But unlike before, by now they should have known that God was going to care for them. They should have known that because they saw it happen so many times. They didn't have to constantly murmur under their breath. This time, Bnei Israel was murmuring for no reason whatsoever. They murmured for the sake of murmuring. They had to know that God would provide them with everything they needed, yet they continued to murmur. This angered God and brought the otherwise patient Moshe to the point of total desperation as he begged God to kill me now. I can't take it anymore, God. It's just not possible. Kill me now. Today, you and I live in a free society, not like that Russian that we spoke about at the beginning, who was happy that now he had the ability to complain. But what is wrong with the world and the injustices we see in our society? We have a right to complain about that, but we must also do something about it. Don't wait for God. Unlike the constant murmurings of Bnei Israel, as hard as it is to believe, you and I too become complacent sometimes. It's easier to complain than to do something. We all know that, and all of us have times we do that. It's just the way it is. We don't complain because we do not want to get involved. On the other hand, when we do complain, we must make sure we do not just complain, but we must try to do what we can to correct those mistakes. If we don't, we are just like Bnei Israel, like the murmurers, until we scream out, kill me now. So let us all learn from the wisdom of our Torah. The Torah is trying to give us wisdom here. Let us all learn to complain about things we should and try to make things better whenever we can. One of the roles that I always tell the bar and bat mitzvah students is our job as Jews is to make the world just a little bit better than the way we found it. Just a little bit better. We don't have to solve world hunger. We don't have to boil the entire ocean, if that would do anything to make the world better. just a little bit better than the way we found it. And like I always say, as for me, I never had a bad day, and I have each and every one of you to thank for that. Again, Shabbat Shalom and Am Yisroel Chai.